Hello, everyone. It's a Polkadot broadcast. It's the monthly roundup. Uh, it's monthly roundtable for Polkadot, and we will catch up on the significant achievement in the Polkadot ecosystem in the previous months. And for this episode, we are very happy to have Alice and Bob, Lucy, and Max with us today because it's a kind of a dramatic month in May, and we have a $5 million proposal, the ambassador program going on, and jam and everything happening. So it's great to touch on these topics, and it's a great time to learn, to reflect, and to evolve. So to kick it off, I would invite every guest to have a quick intro about yourself and your project and tell us how's your May been for you. How about we start from Alice and Bob and Tommy?
Okay, yeah, thanks for having me. I'm Tommy, also known as Alice and Bob. I run OpenGov Watch, so I'm very active in Polkadot OpenGov. We analyze what is going on. We run monitoring. We write treasury reports, governance reports to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to see what's going on in OpenGov. And we also look forward and help OpenGov come to a common strategy by organizing discussions, by mediating discussions and curating all the information and making sure all the dots connect.
Yeah, welcome, Tommy. And I think people who follow closely to Polkadot or Polkadot might have seen the report from Q1 from Tommy. And so, yeah, we will touch on that in the following conversation. So next, let's welcome Max.
Hey, Kristen. Good to be here again.
Yeah.
Oh, you want a brief intro? Well, sorry. So I guess in the Polkadot ecosystem, I'm really wearing two different hats here. One is with Harbor Industrial Capital, which you can see here on this side of the virtual background, Polkadot-focused VC fund, primarily private capital, family offices, and institutional investors amongst our LPs, and we're investing exclusively in the Polkadot ecosystem. And the other hat that I'm wearing, you can kind of see here, it's the city of Hong Kong, which is a very heavy focus for us in terms of running Polkaport East, which is like a growth and IR initiative funded by the Decentralized Futures Program of the Web3 Foundation, which is all about growth and IR for Polkadot in APAC in general, but in Hong Kong specifically.
Yeah, and you're kind of a frequent guest in Polkadot, and we always very welcome you to join us. And next,
always a pleasure.
Okay, let's welcome Lucy, and it's your first time to be in our broadcast.
It is. Thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to be here. I'm a little bit nervous because, as I said, I'm usually the one asking the questions. But yeah, really pleased to be here. So I spearhead the Polkadot Ambassador Fellowship, which is working very hard to be the cornerstone of the Polkadot community, something that can be resilient and withstand all the madness that you said we've had in May, and the madness to come, and the madness before. We've learned a lot of lessons from the past, and we continue to learn every day to try and create a space that can support both the ongoing technical developments and also the influx of people that brings.
Okay, and let's welcome. So I think without further ado, I think we will kick off our topic with Lucy first. Polkadot Ambassador Fellowship was introduced to community back in January 2025, and it's been 4 months now. We've seen it becoming more structured and mature. So I would invite you to give the community, a recap of the past 4 months, and share some the most important milestones that which is very important to the Polkadot ecosystem and to the role that played the fellowship played in the ecosystem.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Yes. So a quick bit of history. So there has been an ambassador program within Polkadot since 2021. There was a program that ran from 21 to 24, which was Ambassador Program 1, and that actually had quite a large number of ambassadors. But it was organized by the Web3 Foundation at the helm, and it grew quite rapidly. But I think what was missing there was a kind of a cohesive core, and that community-driven part, because obviously the Web3 Foundation was still very much sort of at the helm of a lot of things, and with decentralization, they want us to start taking the reins. That was then phase 1. Then became Ambassador Program 2, which was where there were ambassadors elected. Actually, all 3 of us on this call were pushed through OpenGov in an election process. And that was quite a short-lived program, but again, many learnings there. The need for structure and organization amongst the chaos, but in a non-formal, non-managerial way, was what came out of it. And then myself and some others, we started talking about a fellowship, because obviously there's the technical fellowship, which is spearheaded by Gav, and this idea of a wider community-led community. So, really being the core of decentralization. So I wrote a manifesto. Well, I pulled together a manifesto of all the voices of the Polkadot ecosystem. So anything and everything I could find that someone had said or was saying, all of the learnings from the previous programs. And we penned the manifesto for the Polkadot Fellowship, which was voted through very strongly by the community. And we were given a pot of funding to start to fund activities here and build frameworks. So I'm calling this phase. I've recently written I've written this as a story now, because it's a very complex process, building a community of from such diverse corners of the world, such diverse people, such diverse and leading technology. So I'm calling it, that was the genesis cycle. So that first 9 months from inception to where we are now, where we've sort of got a framework, and like you said, we're starting to see some cohesion. That's the genesis cycle. And so we've written the manifesto, we've had that pass, and we've seeded 160, just over 160 ambassadors. And we have built frameworks, which we are now ready to pilot. So on orientation, mentoring, rewards and recognition, these are some of the frameworks that we built as an operational core. And then we had live workshops with ambassadors. So everything we do is for the ambassadors, by the ambassadors. So everything that I try and push forward is not, even though it's me pushing it forward, it's not me. Like, it's not my voice only, it's everybody's voice. So some of the notable achievements are those things. So we're ready to pilot. We've had these 163 ambassadors very much engaged. We do 3 or 4 or 5 kind of weekly virtual meetings where we have education. We have guests coming on a new show like Parity and the Web3 Foundation. So we're trying to hold the mantle of being the body of information gatherers, and then in the next phase will be the information carriers. So that, because the information and communication breakdown that happens when you decentralize a centralized system requires people to all start moving in the same direction again. And so that's what we're doing. So we are organizing. We are not centralizing, but we are organizing information. We are working on sort of narratives within the fellowship that I hope will then carry on to the outside. I'm talking a lot of philosophy here. So if you want some real tangibles, we have a big drive for 10,000 meetups a month, which is going to support Jam and proof of personhood and all the exciting technical developments coming out. We launched the Polkadot pop-up summer next week on the 6th of June, which is part of this. So we've got a big virtual and in-person mission to spread the word, as well as a really solid team building a framework which each of our individual ambassador cohorts can then go out and implement. So the idea eventually is that we'll have kind of global cores. You'll have a LATAM core, but that also has Polkadot Argentina, Polkadot Peru, Polkadot Brazil, all functioning, and they'll have their own budget and they'll have their own kind of solar system that's all part of this bigger, wider Polkadot space.
Yeah. You mentioned there's mentor, mechanism, right? I think it's the thing that only can be heard in the Polkadot ecosystem. How is this mentor system works?
So we will be piloting it with our cohort 2 of ambassadors coming in mid-July. And we started off looking at having rank champions. So the ambassador fellowship is based on rank. And it's a community-driven rank-based system. So it's based on sort of trust, and the more you put in, the more you get out. It's not based on salary. So every ambassador has a voice and a vote. We will be on chain in a couple of months. So the way the mentoring will work is we're first looking for people to stand up within their ranks and say, I want to be part of this kind of educational process. And then we will be looking to pair people up as they come in with somebody who can help them level up on the area that they need to or the area that they want to. So, for example, everybody within the ecosystem essentially has a BD hat that they have to wear. It doesn't make everyone a BD professional, but you do need to know what is the messaging, how do I say the messaging, and then how do I find the right people to take this, how do I find the right people when I know where I need to go. And so part of that leveling up is done through a mentoring matrix. So initially that will be done on sort of rank by rank. So maybe a rank 2 will be paired with a rank 1, and maybe an engineer will be paired with a BD professional. And then there's the knowledge sharing sort of there. And then we provide the tools and the framework and the recommendations on how to be a good mentor. And then as we grow, I hope that these global cores, like I talked about, will start to mentor within themselves. So we'll have Spanish speaking mentors, we'll have Mandarin speaking mentors, because the language barrier is something I've never experienced before. I've always worked in global companies, but I worked in finance and more traditional Web 2 companies where, yes, people speak many languages, but there's a language of business. And it's not just that language is English. There's also, everybody understands what different terms mean. Like there's just a blanket language, and there isn't that here. And that's really, really difficult. And so people use different terminologies, different phraseologies. And we will never succeed as a fellowship or as I think as a Web3 community unless we find ways to break down those barriers. And it's only sort of a realization to me recently when I was like, because I'm doing a lot of talking and trying to explain a really complex and growing every day in complexity situation, and my words just aren't saying the things I think they're saying. And so I've been doing actually a lot of reading and a lot of information gathering to figure out, like, how can I explain things better, and how can I explain them to an audience who's not just about speaking English, is it? It's about speaking about concepts and ideas, and yeah, so it's quite fascinating, really. So I'm trying to weave all of these sorts of things through.
Yeah, it's very important to have a local community, local ambassadors for each regions, because we focus on Chinese market. I was highly before I thought everyone in Web3 they could speak English, so it's okay for us to to make the English broadcast for the Chinese listeners. But it ends up like 80% of them cannot follow the conversation.
Exactly. And I speak quickly, and I use, and there's different terminology, like we've said, and there's also all the ways that you speak and the way that business is done, for example, in China, and this isn't a traditional business market either. Web3 is different, so then you're battling with different cultures, different business languages, different business approaches. I think just the translation, Quinwen from Lollipop translated she's translated our manifesto into Mandarin, and she did the same with the Jam Grey paper, and it's about 3 times as long. And that's just explaining sort of how things are. That's the actual physical language, but that disperses all the way out into how we communicate with each other and how we get these complex ideas across.
Yes, agree with you. Right now, Polkadot ecosystem have many community-led initiatives, DAOs, and decentralized voice, and treasury-supported communities like us, Polkadot. So they've all contributed to spreading Polkadot's value, through events and content, and what you've mentioned that the ambassadors will covering. So how is the ambassador fellowship different? What sets them apart from that kind of initiatives?
Yeah, I think what we feel is that it provides that DVs and DAOs and other communities are very welcoming of anyone that comes in, but they're still relatively siloed in a way. Like a Poker World has a purpose and values and a sort of a mandate, and it fits in with Polkadot and what Polkadot is trying to do, but it isn't kind of at the core. And I think Tommy's written this this piece on the strategy for the ecosystem, and I see the Ambassador Fellowship as the almost it can be parts of the soft fluffy bits of the strategy, but it is the heart of everything that the strategy is being built for. So we are looking to provide structure, scalability, mentorship, and measurable impact with and cross ecosystem collaboration. So I think that they're the big keys. Is that the key differences, I think, is that we're looking to create a space that everybody can come into. So you can be a part of Poker World, but you can also be an ambassador fellow. But also we start to shape what are the values of Polkadot. And I brought this up with Bill when I had him and Karam on the show, and I was talking to Tommy about it yesterday. We all say, well, we need to go out and represent Polkadot. But and then when somebody behaves poorly, maybe we say, well, that's not within the values. But we don't have any sort of written down, agreed, shared values on how we should behave and treat each other and conduct business and all of these things. And I think that is what I would love to see the fellowship be at the heart of.
Yes, it is true. For example, there are Polkadot and other communities in other regions, but we don't communicate a lot to align our values and principles. We all stick to our own, to our region.
Yeah, I think Burning Man is, although I like to try and think of new things, I also shouldn't try and like reinvent the wheel. Burning Man is probably the exact sort of similar state that Polkadot would do fantastically well in. Like there are the rules around Burning Man, and Tommy said this, I think Evan said it a couple of years ago, like there are these sort of commandments, and then everyone has their own villages, their own spaces, their own things that they bring to the table, and they all exist in this wonderful symbiotic space. Now obviously there's a lot more complexities to what we are doing because there are by nature, but that sort of, I think that's a sort of decentralized harmony that we can try and imitate. We can reach for the stars.
Yes, and there are more than 100 fellowship ambassadors right now. So I think some of them could be selected as the fellowship member, right? So what is the expected scale of the fellowship? How can someone become a fellow?
Okay, so that's the wonderful part of the Ambassador Fellowship is anybody can become an ambassador. And we want to create a space where everybody feels welcome, they do not feel judged, and they feel that we have provided a space where they can either discover what it is that they're really good at in the space, or they can exercise their talent and explore new things. So that's what we are trying to build. So anybody can come in, but we want it to feel like that members club, anyone can be a part of, but you have to really give something to it to get something out of it. So it's it's something that you want to be a part of, and you kind of work to be a part of. So it's flexible, it's scalable. You can do it full time, you can do it part time, you can do it as a hobby, whatever it is. But the more you put in, the more you get out. So any skill sets, whether you're a dev, whether you're in business development, whether you're in investor relations, whether you're just someone that's heard about Polkadot and is interested and wants to learn a bit more about it, there's a space for you. But where it becomes really special, because people will say, well, if anyone can get in, why is it special? Because the ranking system is, as I said before, based on this idea of what you put in, what you get out. But it's you building up a reputation within the community, which is very hard when there's no centralized functions. It tends to be people that have either been here longer or people that shout louder that get noticed, and there are lots of people that don't. And so this is a way for people to engage however is more comfortable for them. And so we have inbuilt mechanisms, like on our ambassador platform, we have a job board, for example, and I might put a job out there that I need someone to design a logo, and they come and they apply and they do it, they submit it, they get automatically paid, and then they have this ecosystem CV, and they get an NFT to say that they did this thing. So people can start building up profiles and trust and respect, which will then allow them easier access to other things in the ecosystem, because you built up that layer of trust and respect. And to become an ambassador, we're just seeding cohort 2, and we're working really hard so that if you go onto the public Notion page, which is you'll find through the polkadot.com website, there is a link. We've already been inundated with applications for cohort 3, which will launch by the end of the year. But we're putting in for a proposal, bit of a plug here. The renewal of the funding goes in on Monday. So if we get the funding, the harder we can work to get everything ready to then open for cohort 3, because what we don't want to do is overwhelm the system and the structures, and possibly drown ourselves with too many people. We want to get it right, and then we can open the doors to everybody.
Okay, cool. I recommend you to send the link, the Notion link in our paste it in a comment in our conversation, so people who are watching this broadcast can just click in and have a look.
I will do that now.
Okay, thank you, Lucy. And now let's move to Max. And I remember clearly last month you mentioned that there will be many important updates shared in this episode. So, what significant progress has HIC made in May?
Yeah, you're really bringing out the suspense here, Kristen. I love it. Yeah, I mean, I think we can talk about 3 things, right? We can talk about the new HIC board, we can talk about fundraising, and we can talk about investments. Let's start with the first one. So in terms of the board, so I think I teased this last time when I was on the show. Harbor Industrial Capital decided to put together a board of advisors, an advisory board for the fund, composed of people from within the ecosystem, people who are well known, who are experts in their field, to officially advise the fund on the one hand side in terms of investments, in terms of strategy, and then on the other hand side to kind of report back to the community. Fund 1, right? We didn't really have a board like that. And it was also a bit different because Fund 1 was a purely private fund, right? So all of our investors, all of our LPs were family offices, institutional investor from outside of the ecosystem. For the second fund, as I mentioned, the Web3 Foundation is also coming in as an LP. Which is great, but I guess that also means that we are we're in a situation where we want to make sure that we are better at stakeholder management, right? That we're reporting back to the foundation, to the community, to literally every dot holder, what we've been up to and what we've been investing in. And to that extent, we have set up an advisory board. It's essentially already confirmed who's on it. We'll have 6 individuals there. I'm not going to mention the names right now because not all of them are signed officially yet. But there are lots of people who we all know and love within this community, and I think it's really nice to have like a to establish Harbor Industrial Capital on a little bit more of a sound community-based footing as we move into the cycle of Fund 2. So yeah, I hope next time I can share the names of all the board members. It's supposed to be public information, obviously, moving forward. Maybe the second aspect that I can talk a little bit about is like fundraising. So to that extent, Mario, my co-founder, he's kind of on a bit of a roadshow at the moment through, first Asia. He was in Singapore and then Bangkok last month, and then this month he's in Europe. So he was just in Monaco at an investment summit. He's heading to Paris next, and then the week after to Bucharest in Romania for another investment summit. All of that is with the intention of spreading the good word about Polkadot and attracting like external investments into our ecosystem, because I think that's really what we need. You might remember, like in the past, I tried to do like a much bigger kind of conference series, which would then have been like Polkadot branded and like getting more other people from within the ecosystem involved. Now, we didn't really get the funding for that, so instead we're just scaling it down, and Mario is going there on his own, which I think is still very impactful, because we're going out there and meeting investors, family offices who probably would not really be exposed to Polkadot otherwise, and telling them about it. And we've got some really good feedback here. So that's something that I'm obviously quite excited about. And then the third, bucket, I guess, of updates that we had in May is on the investment side, right? Because ultimately, like, what are we doing at Harbor Industrial? The main job, so to speak, is supporting Polkadot-based projects, right? And so to that extent, we signed commitments with 4 companies, startups that we are investing in. So it's already confirmed. Again, I cannot mention the names yet because it's still on the wraps, but I will, in all likelihood, be able to share the names of those investees, the companies that are building on Polkadot, probably next time around. Mm-hmm. And that's obviously something I'm quite excited about, because if there's anything that we're really trying to do here is like it's getting capital into the hands of builders on Polkadot. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's what we've been up to.
Yeah, but there's a part that I'm curious to know is that Maria's work, when he is engaging with the traditional fund, do they what is their impression to Polkadot?
You mean the external investors?
Yeah, the traditional money, what their impression to Polkadot?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's obviously it's an uphill battle. Let's put it like that. It's not that we have like the name recognition that I wish we did. Although I guess on the flip side, if you go out and speak to people who are relatively new to the space, they also don't really have like this prejudice yet, right? Where they think, oh, Solana is the best, or Ethereum, or some L2 is the best, right? But if you talk to some old school investors, they are coming with fresh pair of eyes, and they really like to look at the fundamentals, right? They want to know what works, like what's the problem that you're trying to solve, what's the product market fit, what's the competition like, and are we better than the competition, right? And if that is the conversation, I think then Polkadot wins, right? It's very easy. So if I really sit down with somebody who's relatively new to space and I explain them, how does like the Polkadot model compare to, say, Ethereum rollups, and why it's like, technologically speaking, a superior model, they get it, right? Because they come with an unbiased pair of eyes. They look at the fundamentals, and I think if you look at fundamentals, then Polkadot wins, and that's something that we're really trying to, focus on.
Yeah, great. And Polkadot has been selected as DV, and we've been working as DV for almost 2 months. We come across a lot of concerns. Is the one occurring issue is that the proposers applying for funds, but all the risks are taken by the treasury, and because some people say that the treasury plays a role of an investor, but in reality, it's more of a funder. They are just funding money without expectation for returnings. But you mentioned a solution that there's a trade-off, can help the treasury make real investments. So we'd love to hear how this idea has evolved.
It's still in planning phase, let's put it like that. But I'm happy to share a little bit more context for the audience here. So, I've been talking to a lot of people in the ecosystem, and there is a bit of a, I guess everyone agrees that we need more apps on Polkadot, especially on Hub, right? Now that we're getting into Hub, we need more apps. We need 10, not just 100, maybe 1,000 apps. I don't know what's the right number, but we need many more apps, many more builders who come in and build cool stuff. And then, one of them is going to be the next killer app with like, 1 billion new users, right? So to get that process started, obviously all these builders, they need to be funded somehow, because even though Hub is great and it's amazing and it's very easy to deploy a smart contract there, developers still have to pay their team, they have overhead, they need to get funded, right? They need to get funded in one way or another. And we currently have a bit of a mismatch, in my opinion, in Polkadot between a lot of grants available and very few investment opportunities available, right? Because unfortunately, very unfortunately, external VCs are still ignoring the Polkadot space. Like I see this all the time when I go to investment conferences, right? They're not really like looking at investments in the Polkadot space. So for the time being, it will be very much up to us, right? The Polkadot internal VC funds to get these kind of guys off the ground and do like an early stage investment in them and support them to, get to the growth stage where also external, like Polkadot external money will take them seriously. But unfortunately, we're not quite there yet. And, because there is this mismatch between grants and investments, many of these projects who are building cool stuff, right? Like with good business models, they just go straight to the treasury and ask for a grant. And in my opinion, that's a bit ridiculous because, these are companies that are building something. They would be happy to give up like equity in their startup, right? In fact, like, I just had a conversation with the founder like a few days ago. He was like, yeah, of course, right? I'm building like a company. I've got equity and like tokens and equity. I use this interchangeably here. I'd be happy to give up equity in my startups in exchange for an investment, right? But I can't really get it. The easiest way I can get money to extend my runway is to just go to the treasury and ask for, $100,000, $300,000 in grants, right? And if it works and if I can lobby the DVs well enough, then I get this money, right? And otherwise I don't. But I don't have to give up equity. And that's actually a bit of an obscure situation, in my opinion. It would be much better if the treasury, if it goes and supports, these startups that we undoubtedly need, also gets something in return, right? If it gets like some tokens or equity in that startup in return, like that's kind of the much more natural way of doing things. Unfortunately, there isn't really like a mechanism at the moment. And we're hoping to change that at some point, but it's not like fully fleshed out. So I'll stop here for the time being, but I hope we're gonna be able to present some solution here at some point in the future.
But I think some proposer will argue that we are applying funding from a treasury, and the treasury have the responsibility to funding them, because if they end up to be successful, it will benefit to the ecosystem in many aspects. It will bring users to the ecosystem. So they don't have to give some actual give back returning to the treasury.
Yes, that's true. That's one way to think about it. But it's also a bit strange, in my opinion, if there's no expectation of a return whatsoever, right? Because VC funds play a very different role from grants, right? And obviously they're not mutually exclusive either. I mean, we can still have treasury grants moving forward as well, and maybe especially for early stage, that's a very positive thing, right? Because maybe the first round of funding, especially something small, let's say $50,000 or something, like up to 100,000. If these kind of grants are available, that's great, right? That makes obviously the life of a founder easier. But afterwards, I generally think investments are preferable to grants. And the main reason for that is that it introduces like a degree of accountability to the founder, right? They have to deliver, right? Founders, they kind of work best if there is some sort of like a constraint, right? If there's some sort of an expectation, if there's somebody, checking in on their progress every once in a while. And the treasury doesn't do that, right? Kind of by definition. I mean, there are some attempts to do that, but I haven't really seen that, play out particularly well. If it's VC money, if there's private capital behind it, and the important part is that it's private capital, right? Not just, sort of state kind of government subsidies here, but like private capital, then you will always have this accountability. And overall, I think that's beneficial for the development of a startup because it does create this degree of accountability.
I think there is a context about the mindset of get funding from a treasury without returning, because I think back to the beginning of the launch of Polkadot Mainnet, it's 6 years ago, and at that time it's very easy for Polkadot ecosystem project to get investors' money, but now it's very hard. So the founders just make their ways to get funding for their teams. So it turns out that maybe treasury is comparatively easy way to support their team development. So I think we can work on two legs. One side they can sometimes get funding, and on the other side, we should considering the VC, the perspective of funding. So, but anyway, we hope that at the end of the day, the Polkadot ecosystem can explode them. Again.
Exactly. And obviously, it's not mutually exclusive by any means. Quite the opposite. I guess my main message here really is we need more capital into startups that are building on Polkadot, especially on Hub, because where else is the growth supposed to come from?
Okay, cool. And thank you, Max. Now let's move on to Tommy. Okay, so you've recently released the Q1 Treasury report, and Polkadot already translated them to Chinese and posted on our channel. And so could you walk us through the key highlights in terms of spending? What areas showed progress, and where do you think improvements are still needed?
Yeah, sure. So I think the starting point for the Treasury report always is that we take two perspectives. One perspective is the balance sheet, and the balance sheet shows us how much money does the Treasury have. And then there is the income statement, and that basically tells us where did money come from and where did the money go. So, and if you take both perspectives, you have a pretty rounded overview over what is going on in the Treasury. So for the balance sheet, what we see is that we have about $135 million in the Treasury. That's $33 million. And so the interesting thing is it's spread across multiple chains. So Polkadot itself is operating 3 chains. So there is the Relay chain, there is Asset Hub, there is the Collectives chain. And then there is also capital deployed on other chains. And that is basically capital that is working in the economy to support the ecosystem. So that is protocol-owned liquidity, for example. And yeah, so if we want to dig a little bit into that, I'm going to scroll there. So we said there is $135 million that the Polkadot Treasury has. About $100 million is cash. That's just money that the Treasury has, either in DOT tokens or in USDT, USDC. And then there is 2 other categories that we can look at. So cash is 100 million. Then we have 25 million that are already designated into certain areas. They're earmarked. So they are given to bounties or to the technical fellowship or to the ambassador fellowship to invest the money or use the money for specific purposes. And it's very interesting if you observe OpenGov, it is developing more and more in a way where these departments are developing and fleshing out and forming. And OpenGov is taking more of a high-level perspective. It's going more and more into making the high-level important decisions and then delegating some of the smaller decisions or the more specific decisions into these departments. For example, just building Polkadot and the runtime itself, that is a job for the technical fellowship, right? We're seeing the ambassador fellowship coming along where it's about lifting up talent, helping people in every region of the world to participate in Polkadot and so on. And so this requires specialized knowledge, specialized skills, and it's not for everyone. It would be too overwhelming if everyone would spend that money, right? So $100 million in cash, $25 million in designated assets, so specialized initiatives. And then there is about $8 million that is capital, that is protocol-owned liquidity that is in the market, mostly in the hydration omnipool in the form of DOT tokens. Then there is a little bit of stable coins invested in Centrifuge. There is a little bit of DOT in Bifrost liquid staking, right? So that in total gives us $135 million. About 92% is DOT tokens, and then 8% is in stable coins. Yeah, so I think that's the balance sheet. And if you have any questions, you can let me know. And moving on. So what did the Treasury, where does the money come from and where does the money go to? So the Treasury is making a little bit of revenue from fees, but that's not really a primary goal right now. Right now, the Treasury is getting most of its money as part of the inflation of the system. So there is a 120 million DOT per year inflation, and most of that goes to stakers. So 85% of that goes to stakers. But then 15% of the inflation goes to the Treasury. That's 18 million DOT per year, or per month, we could say 1.5 million DOT. So one very interesting perspective you can take here is you can say, okay, the Treasury is getting 18 million DOT per year. Right now, that would be $100 million. And so you could say, that's a little bit like a budget, right? So all the cash that the Treasury has right now at the capital, it's the reserves. And the money that is flowing in every month and every year could be seen as the budget. So I think that's a very helpful perspective, because when there is a proposal coming along for 10,000 DOT or 100,000 DOT or 5 million DOT, then we can say, okay, how much of the yearly budget is that, right? If we are negotiating a 5 million DOT proposal, that's almost a third of the yearly budget, right? So, and I think it is very helpful to consider that perspective. Yesterday, there was, just as an example, a discussion about 110,000 DOT for the NFT Mosaic bounty, right? And so you could say, I'm not super keen on NFTs. I don't know, it doesn't touch me too much. Yeah, some people say that. But at the same time, you can say, okay, 110,000 DOT is not too much of the yearly budget, right? That's basically 10% of the monthly budget, and they would use it for half a year. And so from this perspective, I would say, maybe I'm not too keen on NFT experiments, but actually this is sort of research and development. And for experiments, for research, for innovation, it's actually completely acceptable to use 110,000 DOT, right? From my perspective.
Yeah.
So I think this is a perspective that helps us. So 18 million DOT per year are coming in. That's 4.5 million DOT in a quarter. And then where does the money go to? It mostly goes to software development and outreach. So every quarter that we have seen so far, the biggest part goes into software development, new things, new components, and outreach. And outreach is marketing, it's events, it's conference attendance, it's side events. One big part, the biggest spend overall in the last quarter, was the Brave browser integration. So that's $3 million that are going to have an integration in the Brave browser, where you have a Polkadot native integration directly in the Brave browser. So we're hopeful that this is gonna turn out good. What else do we see? Yeah. If I switch over here, Snowbridge is also getting $1 million. There is $1 million for Nova Wallet. And then there is roughly $1 million also for DeFi incentives through Hyperbridge. And then if you're interested in the details, you can look at the Polkadot Treasury report on the forum. Maybe as an overarching comment, I think in the last quarter, we did not spend as much on business development as I would be hoping to see, right? As Max mentioned, I think the biggest measure right now that we should look at is getting more apps, right? I think Max is right about this. And more apps means there needs to be people on the ground in the field that are working to bring the benefits of Polkadot and explain the benefits of Polkadot to people all around. And so business development is a thing that is sort of a hard nut to crack. A lot of people are sort of trying to solve that, how we can do that in a decentralized environment. But I think it's a very worthwhile problem, and it's sort of one of the most important challenges that we have right now. I would say top 3, like it's definitely in the top 3 of challenges that we need to attack and solve right now. And I think so there should be more focus and attention on how we can solve business development for Polkadot. Bring new apps to Polkadot, help developers, help them onboarding, and help enterprises onboarding into Polkadot, and bring interesting projects to Polkadot. Yeah, I think that's an overview. And if you have any more questions, of course, we can go into that.
Yeah, Lucy and Max have some questions to the proposal, but to the Treasury overview.
No, that was really helpful. Having that sort of breakdown, I think thinking about that as a yearly budget It's really helpful. I'm very happy that you said about the BD stuff, because as you know, that's one of the cornerstones of our next proposal. Working with a team called So Scaled, Natalie and Jashar. They're originally DF funded, and they've done a huge piece of BD work around product market research, product market fit. And this is going to tie into our BD 101 course, which we're building, the world's first Web3 GDPR compliant CRM system for the community. And we have built a ticketing system for a manned help desk. So it'll be run by a couple of our well-known BD agents, and then we'll be training up more junior BD people who have an interest, who will be doing sort of the due diligence, the research, the diving in. And this will be a place for all of those sorts of leads to go, and then go out to the right places within the ecosystem. So your Magenta Labs, your Velocity Labs, Web3 Deal Desk, but the place for anybody who is not a BD expert or doesn't know how the ecosystem works, or just has a random lead that they've met somebody, they go there, and then we process it. It goes into the system, and then it goes out. And I think that will be a really big help. And then there's the Web3 Deal Desk as well, run by Nick and Omar, who were at X-Parity. They led BD there, who are also bringing this sort of coordinating layer. So yeah, you led me into a little plug there. Thanks, Tommy.
The other thing that I wanted to say in response to Tommy's comments on the treasury, like the treasury's inflows and like the current treasury's reserves that we have, I think most countries in the world would be proud of us, right? Like they would be proud, they would be very happy to be in a position like Polkadot is, if you think about that, right? Like all the other countries, United States, for example, just over the last couple of weeks, has been going through this budget consolidation, or like, well, I guess trying to balance the budget, right? Having like inflows and outflows roughly equal. I mean, from what you're saying, Tommy, like it looks like we're going to be running like a massive surplus, a budget surplus. So, that's a pretty good position to be in, and arguably would warrant a little bit more, a more, or a less, let's call it like a less conservative spending policy, right? There is money there that is coming in, and yes, maybe we can say we should balance the budget more or less, but running like a massive surplus every year probably can't be the target either. You rather want to go and stimulate the economy, to use like a macroeconomic term, which is another way of saying like spend it on projects that are building in Polkadot.
Oh, okay.
I think it's a fine balance. So it is a fine balance between, because there will be people that take a message like that as the money's just there to be spent, and then I think that's where we come in, and I don't use the term grifter, and I think that there are misuse of money, but I think the biggest problem is that, and you made a point earlier, Max, about not having investment in things, because people can see it as free money, and there isn't that accountability layer. And it might just not be, they're not being grifters, but the project just doesn't work and they just kind of dump it, or, it's...
Yeah, of course. It's on the margin, right? Like, obviously, like, nobody wants to fund like stupid projects, right? But on the margin, you can argue whether there should be like a more or less spending. And I think, from purely like a budgetary concern, or like from a sort of a balancing the budget kind of perspective, I think we're in a pretty good shape.
I think we have to, like, the idea of money just seems so insane in the world we're in. I think coming from, like, I have known about crypto since the very early days, but was one of those people that was like, no, not for me. So I've never operated in a bull run. I've never seen things skyrocket. So for me, if someone's coming in, it's like, oh, it's only 100K, just give it to them. I'm like, that's a lot of money. And I do think that's really important for people to remember. Like, it is a lot of money, and like, we need to hold ourselves to higher standards, I think, in terms of our own accountability, and not expect others to be putting the pressure on us to do it, because it's a lot of money in anyone's world.
So I would say, especially, I don't know, prices for applications are often crazy. I don't know. I'm not going to name names now, but there was one proposal. It was $150,000 for a specific tool in the ecosystem, and it's just never finished. And I don't know. I don't know if the team disappeared, but if we are doing experimental stuff, we can work on much smaller budgets, because you can have a proof of concept, and then if you have a proof of concept, you can work further down, right? And it's much more about putting things into like small units and baskets where you mitigate the risk, and then if people show they can actually deliver, then you go on the further track, right? And I think it again shows that specialization is really helpful, because if you invest, let's say 1 year or so, you like see like specialized departments come along, right? So we see that marketing is professionalizing right now. We see that with the ambassador program, we had to go through a lot of stuff, but we see that also Lucy pushed through, and there's something really good coming out of this now. And I think we need to invest in those specialized project teams. Max, you're running the investment fund, where you gather the knowledge about how to screen projects and move along with them, right?
Yeah, it's a good idea. We are, occurring the recurring issue. What we are encountering, the recurring issue about the proposal is salary related dispute, because I agree with Tommy, and there are some proposals, their salaries increase is insane from my point of view, but because we always will compare the salary to the fellowship compensation or the ecosystem average, but the proposers will argue that it's not fair to compare. So usually they can offer a very beautiful Excel format, Excel to give us a very beautiful calculate about the money, how the money is structured. It's very hard for us to make a fair decision, because from their point of view, it's fair. So do you yeah, what's your take on?
I mean, Tommy and I have been we've been working independently, and now we've done what we should all be doing, and we've come together and realized we've both been doing work on other things, and Anel from the Technical Fellowship has been working on a kind of job boards and how we get people more jobs in the ecosystem. But with that obviously comes these salaries, and I did a salary survey myself last year, and when I was looking at what like salaries for like the Opcom and for myself, etc., were, and I think it's twofold. We need to be realistic about what paying for talent looks like, and not expect if you're going to have real employees, which won't be lots of people, but we are in a space now where you need real employees in a decentralized ecosystem, and we've never had that before. There are people that shouldn't be paid unless they deliver, and that's kind of the odd job people. But then there are people who need to run things beside them, and you do pay for talent, as long as, in my opinion, as long as it is backed up, as long as somebody has a CV, you know what they last got paid, you know what the market rate is, you've done a salary survey, then it should be like any other company if all of that has been done. But I think the problem is that hasn't been done, and we're paying people huge salaries, but based on like hourly rates. But it's only capped at 30 hours a week. We should be moving to like day rates, but also remembering that these people are contractors. So that you're not paying them the overheads of being in an office, and they're not getting any benefits, and they're not getting any holiday. And that sort of stuff isn't going to disappear. Even if we decentralize the hell out of everything we're doing, there are just certain facts that remain about life and living and what things cost, and paying taxes to keep the rest of the world going round. We can't all be tax dodgers nomadically in order to be creative. And this is coming from somebody who has had both worlds, who has had not being paid at all to being paid like a salary that was decent and was up kind of nearly of what I was earning before. But I think we do have to be realistic, and you do pay for talent. You just have to have those. You have to know what is going on in a big wide picture of other ecosystems, other Web 2 things, Web 2 projects, and then get your comparison.
Mm.
You can tell I'm about to put a proposal in, can't you? No.
I think it's still hard to evaluate because they can compare themselves to the top companies in the Web2 industry for their compensation. How can
If they haven't got the CV that proves that they're at that level and you've done the benchmarking, then I always, in this ecosystem, I do the research and then I just whack myself in the middle. I think that's the fairest thing to do while we're figuring this stuff out.
Mm-hmm.
But it's hard. But I think we need to have a really open kind of conversation and not kind of just go at each other, because I think that's what we tend to do. And I think Tommy's a very good person who's a lot less hot-headed than me to lead this conversation in a more structured way. I think $10,000 a month for the head ambassadors had a lasting impact on how we think about salaries. And actually, in the grand scheme of things, for what was being asked, if that was someone's only job, a lot of the people that were in that space, it wasn't. But then you'll have somebody say, well, that's a lot of money. And then it becomes quite difficult to have these honest conversations.
Mm-hmm. Yes. There are, also it is obvious in Web3 industry, like people, like all the ambassadors, they are from different regions, and they have different salary standards. And maybe 10,000 salaries just okay for some regions, but that sometimes a big amount for other regions. So, but we cannot, different them from regions to give them the salary.
On this point, I'll also quickly comment here. Like, I mean, and nor do I think we should, right? I don't think we should like differentiate much between like different regions, because that's kind of leading you down like a slippery slope. And the truth is, I mean, we're all like dialing in here from different parts of the world. This is obviously like a global talent market, right? It's literally, it doesn't really matter where you are. Like, you're always connected on Telegram, on what it's a global market. So I think it doesn't really matter that much where you're based. The one thing that I would say about this whole like sort of salary kind of discussion for ecosystem agents, I guess from my perspective, the most important thing is incentive and alignments, right? That it's not just like sort of a fixed salary, but that it's in some way performance linked. And I mean, again, I guess this is probably me as a VC fund like speaking here, but if you invest in like a founder, right, he doesn't get like a salary, right? He has his tokens or whatever. And if he's doing a good job, and if it's like a great company, and he's building like an amazing product, then yes, he's going to get rich, right? If he doesn't, then he won't, right? So that's the most obvious, alignment of incentive out there. Now, I understand that for kind of salaried employees, and yes, you guys talking about the job board and everything, it's not always so easy to align incentives so directly, like to performance and to success. It's not that easy, but somehow to give them like, equity, like in whatever they are trying to create, is definitely the way to go. Or maybe a combination thereof, right? Like some sort of smaller kind of baseline salary and, equity that is performance based. So that's kind of generally the way I think about this.
Yeah. I think it's quite hard because you're talking like that specifically applies to certain roles, and then there's the roles that just that just get stuff done. So that's where, and this is where kind of Sean and I like come loggerheads, and I think usually Sean and I are on the same page but speaking different languages. But he, thinks somebody should do something and then get paid for it afterwards. Now, there are a lot of things that, like we're talking about this job board, where that can be the case. But ultimately, when you sign up to do something, you're signing up with the promise of pay. And I'm not talking about people's passion for Polkadot. I'm not talking about people being ambassadors. I'm talking about if you are giving up multiple hours of your time because you're doing a piece of work for somebody, or you're working full time for a project. Like, it needs to be like any other job. Like, you get paid, and if you do a crappy job, you won't get paid again. And I think this is where these kind of and this should be for the people that, because this is a brand new thing. I probably am I think I'm the only completely kind of solo decentralized agent that's not like paid by any, like even the PIFs are kind of, I'm the kind of their protector and the one kind of getting the money. And like it's hard because I want to just report and tell people what I'm doing, but it's very hard to get them to listen. And then also, so how do you then review how good my work is? And I would love to find a way to do that, because I would love to fight, because I want to keep doing this and I want more people like me to be able to do this. And so it's a genuine open question, like how do we, because obviously it's also the difference between like not being paid at all and being super rich. And I think that's something that Web3 still is very much about. We're either like we're working on bare bones until we get absolutely minted, and there's no kind of, you need some in the middle to just like, do you know what, I'm happy just earning an okay, a decent amount, and I don't need it to pump. And well, obviously it's very nice if it pumps, but that's not my ultimate goal. And so yeah, I would love to have a wider conversation about how we kind of do these like review cycles almost of what people that are just doing the same sort of thing, because we'll have this with ambassadors, that you'll have it, that's, I don't know how we do that, but it'll be interesting. And I'm not saying I want to write a quarterly review, because I hate doing that, but there should be maybe an in-person talk like this where I kind of talk you through and then people can read the reports, and yeah, just something to think about.
Yeah. So, Tommy, do you have something to add to this topic, like the salary?
A lot, but I think that would take forever, and I think at some point we need to move on. Yeah, I agree with Lucy. I think we should have a bigger discussion around that, and maybe in dedicated formats. And I've just heard this point from many different people that for quality work, we want professional work, and we want to value it at the value that it is worth, and with the respect that it is worth.
Okay, cool. And hope there's there's involvement for this topic in the future. So let's move to the other topics, because we are running out of time. I think we can touch on two topics in the following time. The first is the incentives. The most dramatic proposed in May. Hydration applied for $5 million, and it's finally approved. And in the end, they agreed to they will return 3 million and keep the 2 million and distribute it to the community in 6 months. And we believe that it's a great way. Maybe it's a great way to break out the echo chamber of Polkadot, because Gavin even mentioned in the technical fellowship meeting in the other day that our ecosystem, Polkadot ecosystem, is always like the communication is still inward facing. So for this topic, I want to hear your views. Each of our guests, your take on do you believe that this $2 million dot incentive could help the Polkadot ecosystem to break out of the Polkadot ecosystem, so to let people outside of ecosystem get attention to Polkadot?
I can go first, and I mean, I'm actually going to keep it super brief here. First of all, I was not like a big fan of the idea in general, because it just sounds so much like subsidies, right? And like this kind of picking winners and subsidizing them. Like that was kind of my first reaction. But then I think what really convinced me in the end that it is a good idea is just simply the comparison to other ecosystems. And, like it or not, everyone else is doing it. All the other big layer 1 or layer 0 ecosystems out there are doing that too. And, usually this whole kind of, oh, other people are doing it as well, so we have to do it as well. It's not a particularly good argument, but I still think it is an argument because, capital, there is a global marketplace for capital, or like, let's say capital that is already in the crypto space. And it is obviously borderless. And with borderless, I don't mean countries, but I mean ecosystems, right? And it goes wherever like there are attractive yields, right? And if you look at, I don't know, Solana, at Aptos, at Berachain, or all these kind of guys, they are like massively outstripping Polkadot when it comes to these kind of DeFi incentives, right? And I'm not a big fan of these ecosystems. I think I made this loud and clear on multiple occasions. But, at some point in the DeFi space, we have to compete with them. And these, 5 million or now 2 million DOT that is provided to hydration is still a very, very small absolute number in comparison to what other ecosystems have been spending here. So that's kind of my 2 cents, right? Like, even though in general, I'm not quite aligned with this subsidies, right? Kind of government subsidies. There's actually one fun analogy that just comes to my head, right? Like, and it's, now there's all this talk about like trade wars, like Trump and tariffs and so on and so on and so on. It's kind of when you say like, oh, some other country is like subsidizing their own industries, right? Like, oh, illegal subsidies or something. You can kind of say like, oh, okay, I don't like it, but you also can't really change it, right? Because of course they can do it, right? From Polkadot's perspective, of course, Aptos or Solana can subsidize their own DeFi ecosystems. So you kind of have to somehow still find a way to level the playing field. And if it means coming up with your own subsidies at the end of the day, it's still a response.
Yes, maybe this is the most effective way. So, Lucy, what's your take on this?
I agree with Max. Partly, and I think I still am in the same position he is. The only thing that subsidizing things and kind of buying popularity, but I know that it's not like that, and it's a lot deeper than that. And I sort of came around in the same way he did. My only concern, and continues to be my concern for all of this stuff, is like, what do we ultimately want out of it? Like, do we want to just create more wallets, or do we want to onboard people into the mission that is Web3 and spreading the technology? And that's what I think we are all kind of trying to do, and what I hope the fellowship will play a big role in, because when you get people here, which is what this money will do, what do you do with them? And how do you keep them engaged, and how do you make them want to not just stay, but like really embrace what it is we're doing? So is it premature? Possibly, because I personally think Polkadot is great. I don't think we need to make it great again. I think it's been a slow burn for a long time, and it's not burning out. But yeah, so maybe premature, but I do get it, and I back the guys that do it, and we'll all stand together and do our best to make it work.
Yeah, and Tommy.
Yeah, if you look around the world and you look at the biggest cities, they typically have one commonality, and that is that they either started at a bridge, or also at a river, or at a big seaport, right? There is exceptions to this rule, but typically, if you look around, this is where the biggest cities are. So, and why is that? Because at a bridge is sort of a choke point where trade goes through, right? So if you're coming from one side, you have to pass the bridge, and if you're coming from the other side, you have to pass the bridge. And so building a business near the bridge is a very sure way that you get a lot of foot traffic through, right? And so you have a lot of business, and suddenly then more people live there, and there's more business and more business and more business. So this is how cities grow at a bridge, and at a seaport it is similar. You build a seaport, and if you have a successful harbor, there is a lot of traffic coming through. You see Singapore and you see Hong Kong I'm not. I have
my
to
virtual
yet
background.
learn more about the history of Hong Kong. But for Singapore, I know it has grown so big because it created a free. There was a free port harbor that made it very attractive for trade to come through, right? And I guess for Hong Kong, it's the same way. So we have to ask, if we want to build an economy, what is the economy based on? And DeFi is one of the only so far validated use cases in crypto. I have a strong belief in Web3 that there is many use cases that will be validated in Web3, but so far DeFi is the one that is most validated. And Polkadot is, if you look at the numbers, it's clearly behind, like in absolute and in relative numbers. So we need to catch up. Some people say, okay, we should not participate in that competition. We should focus on other fields. I don't think so. I think trade is very important because it attracts projects that want to get access to capital, and it attracts users that want to get access to capital. If you want to trade, and if you want to arbitrage, and if you want to trade with size, you need to have a market that is big enough to trade. So we should definitely invest in our markets as a basic baseline. So that's number one. Number two, I think hydration is the killer app that is right now there in Polkadot in terms of its technology. And I can keep talking about this. I won't. But like technologically, it's the killer app that we have right now in Polkadot. We have a few others brewing, but this one is, if you compare it with other DeFi products, it's exceptionally good, and it will be like even better in the future. So I think this is a very good match. Where we say we want to grow our DeFi market, and hydration is an exceptionally good product to do it. Providing liquidity incentives is renting liquidity, so it's a time-based game where you say we're renting capital for some time to be active in that market, and then we hope, or we do our work to make sure that it sticks. We sort of incentivize that there is more economic activity. We make it very cheap, or we even pay a little bit. And in that time that we're getting, we can prove that our markets are really good, that our products are really good. I think it will have a net positive benefit for hydration. I think it will have a net positive benefit for whatever is coming on Asset Hub, for Polkadot, and it has a positive effect also on DOT and the economy, attracting more users. I think definitely, to your question, Kristen, that it is also helping us to face outwards, because similar to users, capital is its own thing, is its own life form, right? And it gets attracted by incentives. And this information doesn't need to reach a lot of users. The information needs to reach other capital that then learns that there is incentives here, and then it moves here, and it triggers the people that own the capital to put their attention to Polkadot, right? So I think it works on all fronts. It's a hard sell, like $5 million was a hard sell, but I'm happy that we came to this solution with the $2 million, and then putting $3 million into other liquidity initiatives in the future.
Yeah, the trade is very important. For example, if the big exchanges wanna integrate the stable coins on Asset Hub of Polkadot, they have the requirement for the liquidity. So if we don't have enough incentive to attract the liquidities, there's no way we can get integration. So hope that incentives can perform well in the end. But I think the purpose of doing this is to let more people to know about Polkadot, because Polkadot already, no longer the parachain stuff, like people recognized before. So Polkadot now is more about new architectures like services, core VM, core play, and more, but few of people know of them. And Gavin also mentioned, as Alex asked Gavin, if he considered to issue a new token on Gem. And Gavin's the purpose of issue a new token is to give people a new recognition of the Gem, and instead of the old impression of Gem. So, but it's not decided yet, and it's still on pending. So I want to hear the voices from you guys, and what's your take on this? Issuing a token on Gem, really helps Polkadot to rebranding for rebranding it. So who wanna take it first?
I'm happy to go first here.
You go.
Or yeah. Well, I'll keep it brief. So yes, when Gavin said that on the Open Dev call the other day in response to Tommy's question, I think like quite a few people like asked themselves, it seems pretty vague, his answer. Like his answer was essentially like, I don't know, right? Like no decision yet, right? And so then I also went to write the forum post where I just like laid out my opinions on this particular topic. And then this forum post actually got quite a lot of traction, lots of comments there, which I think is good, right? Because I think it's a discussion worth having in the open, right? It's not something that should be decided behind closed doors, because quite obviously this is something that really concerns everybody in the Polkadot ecosystem. I guess my main point here is, the existing dot holders have to be happy, right? I mean, I think that should be a pretty easy guiding principle, right? And so as soon as you start, introducing any kind of like a new token, right, like a jam token or whatever you want to call it, there is a very obvious, very very real possibility that it starts drawing attention away from dot and eating into its market cap, which I don't think is in the interest of anybody here who is an existing dot holder or an existing participant in the ecosystem. So anything that kind of does like anything that is sort of like a conversion that is not like one-to-one or like non-linear, I think does not really make sense. And also, more simply put, there is no need for it, right? At the moment, I'm still to hear anybody really argue the case that we need like a new token on top of dot, like a new gem token. I haven't heard like a single argument why we suddenly need one. Now, with all of that being said, it is interesting to think about it purely from a marketing and branding perspective, I think, right? So I don't think I'm in the camp where I said we absolutely have to do it, but I think I'm in a camp where I say it's worth exploring, right? Because jam, and I spend a lot of time like, reading and researching into jam myself. Jam is really quite a breakthrough technology, right? It's not like a evolution of Polkadot. It's like actually a radical change, right? It's something completely new, a new architecture that then can run Polkadot as one of its services, but it can also do a lot of other things, right? And we're still at the cusp of like really grasping what that all is. And so this is kind of a sea change here. And it would be good to signal that to the wider public. And yes, you can do all kind of marketing things. You can talk about jam and you can do it from a technical perspective. But of course, doing some sort of a rebrand, right, would be by far like the most kind of in your face, message of this is something worth paying attention to, right? And that's kind of, we can argue about it, but I think this could be a good outcome to achieve, right? Like that people are actually paying attention and going like, oh, what's actually this thing, right? What is this new jam thing, right? Like what actually is it? And so purely from a marketing perspective, I think there is something to it. Now, is it definitely the right idea to rebrand dot as jam? I'm not convinced yet myself either, because in the execution of the rebrand, there are certain risks as well, right? And other people have pointed this out as well, and I fully agree. Like we obviously spent a lot of time of effort building up the Polkadot brand, right? We've done all these kind of sports sponsorships, whatever, right? Like to get the name out there. And so in a way, it would be a bit unfortunate to give that all up. and also like how it's actually done, how a potential rebrand is being executed. I mean, it's not easy, right? Like a lot of other rebrands in the past and other ecosystem were a bit of a disaster. So, it would really take a good, marketing PR agency to pull it off successfully. But so, it's not an unconditional yes from my perspective, but I think it is worth exploring. And I think the main point really is Jam is a really brand new technology, and it would be interesting to find good ways to actually draw attention to that and get the attention that I believe it deserves.
Yeah, I think it's a double-edged sword. We have some examples from other ecosystems, like they already rebranding their names by renaming their tokens, or but it doesn't work well. There are some examples that it doesn't works well, but there are also new tokens issued, but it doesn't perform well. In the end, at the end of the world, it brings bad branding for the ecosystem. So it's really hard to say. So Lucy, what's your take on this?
Well, I have a lot of thoughts. So I asked this question this week on the new show, The Fellowship Meets. We met the Tech Fellowship, and the fellows on there said that they, Jam is an extension of. It is an extension of Polkadot. It's what it was always supposed to become. Obviously, it's light years ahead in terms of the difference. It's like if you have two children and one of them's 18 and one of them's 2, there's a big difference between them, but they're always, they're part of the same. So I think that this is a conversation that is sort of so premature, and for us to be having it sort of openly and publicly in itself is probably unnecessary. I think that brands are built on trust, longevity, things that people know, and in a space where there's already so much upheaval, where we haven't even managed to attract. I think there's something like 30 million people in the world use crypto. There's 9 billion people in the world, or 8 billion people in the world, and 300. We're talking about 30 million. Sorry, we need that. Personally, I like the brand. I think it stands for being ahead of the curve. It stands for not listening to others that are falling at the wayside or that are selling out to get to the top. And I think if you were to flip that on its head now and completely rebrand it, I think Polkadot would die. I think there's a lot of work been put into to make this a brand that people trust. And I do think people trust it. From my time on the ground before I put on my ambassador hat to fight for this program, because it's another thing that could be thrown to the curb for yet another time. And I feel like we do a lot of things like this. We do a lot of, oh, it's not working, we'll chuck it. Well, the marketing bounty was rubbish before, so let's call it something else. They've decided not to, fortunately. I don't want to call the ambassadors something else, because that's what they are. They're ambassadors. Like Man United doesn't lose the cup and call itself, Man Town. You have to stick with it, and you have to have conviction in what you do and what it is you stand for. And that's, I think, when Jam is released and it's fully functioning, and if it is a completely kind of standalone product, and that becomes the head and Polkadot's the sister, that's kind of fine. But I think rebranding in order to try and shake something that is as strong and fantastic as what Polkadot has gone through all these trials and tribulations and still has so much to explore would be madness. That is my opinion. But yeah, and as I said before, I think Polkadot is great. I don't think we need to make it great again. From my limited time on the ground when I was working with investors, and obviously when I worked with Bjorn, I spoke to a lot of people, and I still do have quite close investor circles. And the main comment is still, we thought it was dead, i.e. like, we don't hear from anyone. This is not in Max's circle. He's in APAC. This is like talking about like people in the US and in Europe. because the Harbour can't do everything and Skytail can't do everything, and it's about lots of people talking about it on that executive level. And then when you just take a bit of time to walk them through it, and I'm sure Max has had this so many times, like, oh, I didn't know any of this. Like, that's more important, is reinforcing what we have. Plus, I love pink. So, and I know even the color code, it's FF2670. If you ever want the exact pink, if you're doing any sort of work on Google, that's the color. So don't rebrand.
Yeah. I love your perspective. Okay. So, Tommy, do you have some comment on this?
Yeah. So for me, a new token is a hard no. A rebrand, you can talk about it. And so I want to start again with a real world example. Google created a new parent company that is called Alphabet, right? And Alphabet is a much bigger company that does a lot more stuff than Google. The ticker changed, the stock is still the same. Facebook created a much bigger company that is called Meta. They are doing much more than Facebook. The ticker changed, the stock is still the same, right? And I think going for a new token purely from let's say from a marketing perspective is maybe a calculated risk, but I think it's a miscalculation. Because essentially what you do is, even if you give DOT holders like some amount of the new token, it's essentially a haircut. It would introduce a lot of uncertainty in the market. What does it mean for DOT? What does it do for the DOT ecosystem? How does this stuff work together? And then you have to come up with something to explain how, like, this is for that and that is for that. And the DOT tokenomics are exactly created for the kind of use case that Gem is providing. Gem is a technological upgrade. It's a new engine that makes Polkadot much more powerful. But from the basic economics, everything is the same. And so there is no reason to have a new token. And I also think that, so I believe like Polkadot is an ingenious idea, but it took a long time to really find product market fit. And I think we found product market fit maybe like a half year ago or a year ago, where we realized, okay, Polkadot is actually a B2B product. It works for large, like parachains. Parachains work for large enterprises and so on. And now the whole decentralization of the ecosystem and finding everything and sort of stabilizing this in a way where we can carry it forward and where we can attract teams building on this and have the whole workflow and pipeline and have a product that is appealing. We just got around to have that. And it will take a long time for Gem to come around and be like super practically useful and you have the full pipeline figured out, right? Even if it launches, you will have the same issues that you will have with parachains from day one and that you have in any other ecosystem when you launch it, right? So you can have a new idea and you can use a token as an investment vehicle, but what does it tell if you like just get around to finish the product and then you take the attention away to build something new? I think people are sick of this. They have seen this so many times in the market that found something and then after some time they move on to something else. Personally, I think people are sick of it. I'm very sick of it. And it's one of the reasons why I always was a big fan of Polkadot, is because people here are very based. They care a lot about the technology and the mission. And I want to hold on to that.
Yeah.
So, big fan of DOT.
Yeah. Thank you for your sharing. As a big fan of DOT, I think I'm on your side. Okay. Thank you so much. We are running out of time, but thank you so much for every guest to share your insights. And there's tons of knowledge to sink in today. And thank you for all the listeners to be here, staying with us today. And hope you can keep follow Polkadot and follow Polkadot Ambassador the fellowship, and follow HIC and Bob and Alex to keep updated for everything happening in Polkadot ecosystem. And I think that's all for today, and see you next time.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, Kristen.
Thank you, Kristen. Thanks, everybody.